So there are three conditions that you need to be able to explain and discuss treatments for over the course of this unit. And the first one of those is a phobia. So a phobia is an extreme or irrational fear of an object or a situation. It's important that we distinguish between a phobia and a fear. A fear is perfectly normal and a perfectly rational response to maybe a dangerous situation. A phobia is something which is taken well out of rational proportion. Now, for your exam, you need to be able to explain how phobias occur using the behaviourist approach specifically. So if you're still not sure about the principles of the behaviourist approach, it will be well worth looking back over the screencasts on classical conditioning and operant conditioning. They will help you get to grips with the general principles. And it's important to remember that when we're thinking about behaviourism, we're talking about behaviour which is caused by a stimulus or stimuli in the environment around us. So this is behaviour which is learned. So the behaviourists use what's called the two-process model to explain how phobias are initiated, how they're begun, and then how they're maintained. So the initiation or the start of a phobia is explained using classical conditioning, and then the maintenance of a phobia is explained using operant conditioning. So if we think about the initiation of a phobia first of all, so remembering that classical conditioning is about pairing a neutral stimulus with an unconditioned stimulus. If we take in this example our neutral stimulus being a dog, so before the phobia is conditioned, that dog would elicit no response in an individual. However, if it gets paired with an unconditioned stimulus, for example a bite, maybe a serious bite from a dog, that would give the unlearned response or the unconditioned response of fear of that particular animal. Now, if those two things are paired together, so we've got the dog and the bite, what that would lead to is an unconditioned response, in this case a fear of all dogs. So while usually with classical conditioning we might say that that pairing might have to happen several times in order for the neutral stimulus to become a conditioned stimulus, in the case of something which is quite extreme like a dog bite, it may only take one pairing in order for that conditioning to take effect. So from that point it becomes generalised to all dogs, and fear is shown as a response to that conditioned stimulus. The maintenance of a phobia happens through operant conditioning, and specifically in this case through negative reinforcement. Now remember, negative reinforcement is the removal of a negative situation, and in this case the negative situation is the increase in anxiety that an individual would experience when they're placed in the vicinity of their phobic object. So in our example that's a dog. So if they see or they're around a dog, anxiety increases, and that encourages the individual to show avoidance behaviour or to move away from that particular stimulus. Now, because that avoidance behaviour causes a decrease in anxiety, what it does is reinforce that avoidance behaviour. So it reinforces the idea that you should avoid the thing that's causing the fear in the first place, which in turn reinforces the idea that that object is to be feared. There's more detail on the two-process model in the pre-reading, so have a look at that if you'd like to go into a little bit more detail. But before you come into the lesson, make sure that you can outline how classical conditioning can be responsible for causing a phobia, and then how operant conditioning can be responsible for maintaining a phobia.